Hey everyone, welcome to Working Forward. I'm Izzy Cannell.
And I'm Brad Golden. We're the Workplace Insights team here at BirdSense and your co-hosts of Working Forward. This is where we share stories and forward-thinking ideas with people who are shaping the future of the workplace. Working Forward unites the global workplace community through inspiring conversations with the people driving change by sharing ideas you can act on today and revisit whenever you need a little spark.
Today we're joined by Melissa Painter, a storyteller and research designer who founded Breakthru. Melissa's work spans filmmaking, immersive design, and product creation, focusing on how technology and space can enhance our well-being. From well-being rooms to immersive digital interventions, Breakthru is reimagining how we interact with our environments to foster healthier, more human workspaces.
In this conversation, we explored how technology and design can help people reset, connect, and use spaces more effectively, whether it's making meetings more engaging, revitalizing gathering spaces, or transforming underutilized conference rooms. Melissa shares insights on the importance of movement, the power of shared experiences, and how Breakthru is leading the way in creating spaces that support cognitive and emotional well-being.
As we dive into today's episode, Melissa will take us on a journey through the intersection of technology, design, and well-being. We'll explore how Breakthru is pioneering new ways to enhance our daily work experiences, making them not only more productive, but also more human. Let's get started. Well, Melissa, let's start with you. Can you tell us a little bit about what Breakthru is and how did your journey get you here?
I think I was born an anti-technology technologist. And so I've always used technology in my making, but I've always been kind of wary about what technology's impact is on our lived experience. Because at core, I believe humans are full-bodied thinkers and learners, and that a lot of things we learn and experience that are important in the world come from movement, right? So we were momentarily just talking about surfing. Dance has been a big part of my life. Kinesthetic literacy, what your body knows before your brain knows it. Those are real human truths and something that matters deeply to me. Experiential learning. So, cut to when I was a baby, I directed films for a living, which is basically you're an experienced designer. You're trying to take someone on a journey, and you're using multisensory stuff to get them there. From there, I ended up leading a studio that was really on the cutting edge of working with emergent technologies, spatial technology, off-body sensors, augmented and virtual reality, spatial sound. And really, that was like, again, back thinking about what's a healthy relationship between a human body and technology? How can we get some of our more organic ways of thinking and working, thinking on our feet back into our workday and our school day? Breakthru, when it was first hatched, was about that. Can we show up in someone's work or school day, give them an experience that is just 2 minutes long, that breaks them away from whatever their mindset was before, it gives them an embodied experience and gets them ready to go, right? So not a well-being offering, like a cognitive performance tool. Fine. We were doing that in spatial computing, which was fantastic, but it wasn't like where we were planning on staying. And then for us, a big moment was that when COVID happened, Microsoft, who'd funded a lot of our research, came to us and said, hey, world is about to get stuck inside Microsoft Teams squares. What can you do? Is this micro break tool that you've been working on something that could show up in that arena? And at first, I'm serious, we were like, ugh, like to us, being in this arena, stuck to the screen is kind of the enemy. That's why we believe workplaces are so important and place-based experience. And yet it was like what was happening for everyone, right? So we thought about it the way designers would, and we're like, okay, can we stick to our core design principles and bring something to teams? Can it still be interactive? Can it still be multisensory? Can it still be immersive? Can it still be fast? I feel like it's just in a hand's reach. Could you share it with others? And once we figured out we could do all those three things, we said yes. And then we launched. And the next thing we knew, we were in 72 countries and 45,000 organizations. So it's been a journey from there. And we became a startup, and that was a headache, but that's what you have to do to form a new business. And yeah, so that's where we came from.
I think, there's ways of thinking about design, and I love like the body first idea. Like it's a little bit there in the sense of like designing for ergonomics or even, the movement of people. Like we have some customers that are implementing like beautiful staircases, right? That go through the core of the building. And naturally people just kind of gravitate to these places and will be walking up and down them, having, social conversations. But the intentionality of what you're talking about, I think is such a beautiful thing. Like, there's almost like this respect that comes with that, right? Like, I'm showing up for myself or my body in this way, or my company is supporting me to show up for myself in this way. I think it's really special.
We let the tech win when we decided everyone had to sit still to think hard at work and be productive. And the thing that's ironic is that it's completely counter to everyone's lived experience. And the minute you say to a room full of skeptics, well, what happens when you get stuck? Have you ever gone on a walk to have a fresh idea? Like, every hand in the room shoots up. And so we've known since we were tiny, we feel better if we move to think. And yet this and like being chained to our calendar, just honestly, the number of people I talk to globally who don't, it's not that they don't have time to talk to a colleague on a staircase in that invitation to move, like they literally don't have time to breathe between meetings.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's a catastrophe of our own making. And part of why I have such admiration for people who think about workplace is they've always thought about these things, right? It's part of their domain expertise. And from my vantage point, as we design the future of work, we need to be listening to those voices even louder than the people building the tech and the people running the numbers, because the truth around productivity is you can't think well if you can't breathe.
Yeah, it's a great point. And I mean, maybe we can riff on that a little bit more of like, what are the consequences of not addressing this? How is this affecting like the employee's health or their focus, connection? What is that? What are the impacts of this?
I mean, the thing that makes me smile is that, yes, they're commonsensical, but the science is so astronomical that backs up a point of view that people need interstitial spaces, people need to move, people need interaction with colleagues, people need a sense of different kinds of spaces for different kinds of work. The consequences of designing a workday where someone will look at you seriously and say, I don't have time to use the restroom or to breathe in my workday, are that you cognitively turn people off. We cannot think under those circumstances. The average, sort of knowledge-based worker is holding their breath at 2:00 in the afternoon. And they're doing it because they go to get ready to deal with the onslaught of information in their inbox, and they don't even know they're doing it. And they don't exhale. So they're in a full-blown adrenal spike. They've completely lost cognitive decision-making powers. They're suffering workday fatigue. And by the end of the day, and I dare you, go ask anyone in your arena and be like, do you ever feel done at the end of the day? Or do you feel like you're buried alive under a list of things you wouldn't get to? Everyone today is going to say buried alive. Like, nothing about that respects the way that the human brain works. So that's like the cognitive side of it. But then there's some other really like tantalizing things just from a creativity standpoint, how we think well with others, right? We think well with others in spaces together. And what comes out of those encounters is fresh ideas. We expand our intelligence because we scaffold on the cognitive capability of the whole room, the whole team. You can't do that in the same way in this context. When teams have like deep trust and knowledge of each other because they have had time in shared spaces or done many projects together, of course, this can be a shorthand, but it just literally, there's been studies done. It does not take the cake in terms of being able to get to the next great idea. And you don't have the energy give back. And then, I mean, I'm leaving aside the medical, but the cost to the medical establishment just for musculoskeletal injuries is insane, like unbelievable. And then that's leaving out the fact that there's not a chronic condition we suffer from that's not directly linked to sedentary behavior.
I think it's really powerful, right? The way you started with the science framing of all of that, and all signs lead toward we need something better, right? I'm curious what it's been like for you as you've worked with your customers. What have you found about the types of companies that are choosing to support their employees with tools like Breakthru, and how could that maybe help others? Other companies start to look at some of these solutions.
One of the things that's the most fascinating is when I say we hit 45,000 organizations, like we literally hit 45,000 organizations in 72 countries. And so that meant there was no vertical specific to interest, to employee interest, right? So that meant in every kind of company, or organization, preschools in Poland all the way up to Harvard, the national healthcare system in the UK, all the way down to a small community-based nonprofit, and literally everything in between, right? Auto, like all these industries we never even thought would be interested. What's fascinating is the interest was coming from the employees who knew they needed a break, not from their leadership. And that's been our really interesting journey as a company. The companies that have moved first from us from leadership down are the ones that you would expect. I mean, they're blue chip companies who have decided it's part of their brand to do the right thing. And so we're very lucky to work with incredible corporations in that regard. I actually feel really strongly about this, and it's a really big answer. I think one of the things that we observe even in those companies that we have strong partnership and entry with is the moment that well-being became a department, even though the people running those departments are geniuses in care, it essentially became a silo. And it became a silo that was not necessarily operationalized. It was me saying, here's something for you to try because this might help you. And the God's honest truth is that is not how you change culture of the workday. You change culture of the workday by operationalizing it. So what's the smartest thing you could do? Make 25-minute meetings. I mean, it just doesn't take a big brain to see that. You care about energy management. That's why there's coffee and M&Ms in the break room. Well, here's an energy management tool. That's something an ops person, a safety person, a manager is thinking about. And so what I feel like is an obstacle to most smart workplace innovations and workday innovations is that none of the silos we set up represent who needs to be in the room. They all need to come together to actually make change happen, right? And Breakthru is tiny, and yet we can be in one organization, and we're with the workplace experience people over here, and then we're with facilities over here, and then we're talking to the digital signage team over here, and then there's comms, and then there's, well-being. I mean, honestly, why is there not someone just standing there thinking about employee experience and, organizational health who can pull all those conversations together?
Yeah, silos continue to be such a challenge in, the real estate and workplace space, especially as we start bringing in the experience and the HR and the people side of everything more and more. It seems every year, which is a good thing. But I think that silo piece just continues to be a challenge that we hear with a lot of our customers.
Yeah, there's such a challenge for it to be embedded, like that well-being side of the house kind of becomes almost like a marketing ploy or hollow to some extent.
It's not the right terminology.
Yeah.
Well-being defines that it's an individual's perhaps even selfish need for self-care, or they're a wimp, it's honestly, or it costs $800 to buy the smoothie that's going to give it to you. I mean, it's an industry. It's a well-being industry. And if you look at the industry, it doesn't look that great in terms of what pragmatic tools it's offering. So, I argue for rename it, and it's about experience. About experience. And that's where all these things align. And, it's also everyone's on a different timeline. The poor people in workplace experience, it's it's going to take 20 years to build it. Well, that's silly because you could make this experiential change tomorrow and it could have impact. But everyone's you're in charge of the chairs. Well, you're in charge of the schedule. Well, it was absurd. These things all go together.
Yeah, and that brings us to a beautiful segue into understanding, at Breakthru, what exactly do your interventions look like? You've talked a little bit about these micro breaks. What can someone expect with a Breakthru intervention?
Breakthru is a system of guided movement and breathing-based breaks that are mood-based in terms of what you reach for. And it's operating in a bunch of different points of science about how to reset your body, how to clear your mind, how to give you an interactive experience so you feel like you had a creative moment. The breaks in the context of your own screen are just 2 minutes. And part of that is, please, we hope there's a 2-minute sliver. And then there's a system of sharing. So people gift them to each other. They use them in meetings. There's a lot of research that went into how they look and feel. They are always immersive, always interactive, nature-based. They have seasons. They are built by real humans who, 2 of our movement designers are in their 80s and have between them, I think, 7 black belts and 3 degrees. And there's by body-based experts. And then we do motion capture of them. So everything in it is still spatial design. So that's a piece of it. The breathing breaks really are for people who just need a minute of bird song and give me some feedback to help guide my breathing. But Breakthru didn't originate in this setting, as I was implying earlier. I mean, we're a fully spatial sound visual system. And so we also, in many of the partners that we work with, pop out into room scale. So that might be a single projector that looks like an R2D2 that you can pull around and put at the front of a meeting one day and hide in the conference room with you the next day, completely flexible. We also do like super cool, a little bit more intense redos of well-being rooms with a multiplicity of projectors. And then lately, in some companies, we've been doing digital signage, and we're just the thing up for people to take a break together at 2:00 in the afternoon, or as they leave work, or to pass through in some transition spaces in the workplace. So it's a layer of experience that can be a digital overlay to an already built environment that's pretty fast and flexible, which hones to our core idea of it should be accessible, it should be affordable, it should be easy, and it should be modable to what you need in your space.
Yeah, I love also, should be shared, right? I've received a couple of the emails from you all that from the experience you shared with us, where it was a bouquet of
Yes.
experiences or a bouquet of pauses. I forget what you call them, but where I could share each of those roses. Correct me if I'm explaining this
No,
right,
it's
but
totally
I
right.
could share those out, and it's kind of this moment to you know, pause and just think about who you want to share that with. And that alone is kind of a break, right? You're taking the time to think about others and who you want to have this experience and have, just a little nudge, which I thought was really, really wonderful. And just, something unexpected in my day. I get that email in the middle of a work, busy work morning, and to be able to just get out of the workspace, think differently, think about people, right? Think about the people in my life, in my work, in my, personal life. Like, who do I want to share this with? So yeah, I just wanted to share that little anecdote too of kind of a personal experience with what you all have shared with us.
I love hearing that. It's so funny. We launched that inside the app almost as an Easter egg, like no announcement, tiny little thing. And it is going all over the world. And
So cool.
people are sending it with the kindest notes to each other. And we don't see those unless it bounces back to us. But some of them we've seen, and it's just like, it's amazing how much strength people get from some of their colleagues and how deep those relationships are. I think the truth is, back to the neuroscience of it, that active thinking and giving has enormous positive benefits just on your own physiology. But from a culture change standpoint or behavioral change, people will not take breaks if their peers and managers do not model it. Period, full stop. Like, you can prove that idea, but others have proven it before. And so I find that part really interesting because it means we need to encourage each other. And yet again, the narrative around well-being is, oh, this is for you, or this is for you, and that's just not how it goes. The number of leaders who don't understand the degree to which everyone's going to do what they do, not what they say, is just funny to me. But I mean, it's the truth, right? And if you sit there, like, oh, you guys take breaks. I don't need them because I'm a type A and I'm going to rule the universe. Like, I want to grow up to be a ruler of the universe. Why would I take breaks? I want to be you when I grow up. I mean, it's just this or you've got the leader who's really always putting their team first. We see this in healthcare all the time. That's why nurses never take breaks. I mean, it's out of an enormous thinking of others, but they don't realize that then there's a trickle down, right?
Yeah, we spoke to Miss Ella Ducali from Charter, and she's really focused on engaging with leadership and like the people side of the org. But one of her frameworks that she was talking about specifically is just that of modeling and the importance of leadership modeling, and how that becomes a huge gap in leadership in general. So it's interesting for you to bring that up here.
Well, we don't train leaders for it either, right? And yet when you talk to a leader, a lot of what's front of mind for them frequently is things like the energy of their team. Do people feel overwhelmed? Are they seeing people frequently it's your top performers who are about to just implode because they've been racing, right? And yet, if you don't hand those managers tools to model different behavior or contend with it, and that was what was at the core of Breakthru being shared from the beginning. We'd seen our data that the people who needed breaks the most were the least likely to take them, and that the only thing that would convince them to do it was if there was a collective benefit. Again, nurses was one of the top data sets, and now we're in 85% of the hospitals in the NHS, and it's from nurses gifting it to each other.
Wow. That's powerful. 85%. It's a big system.
It is a really big system, and it's still, it's still, we have a long way to go there still, but to just watch it spread like that has been really meaningful, especially when
Yeah.
you get on a call with someone, they're like 15 years in and I've never taken a break. This is the first time I'm, taking a break.
There's something like really powerful behind the psychology of what you're talking about here. Like we were talking about silos, and what comes to mind in hearing about this gifting strategy is that it really helps people feel seen. And this was like a fundamental need for us to feel seen, right? But in doing that, like we have internal Slack channels here where we call out like a kudos. And so it's nice. There's, like some praise from a colleague. But the thing that your program takes to the next level is that you're actually embedding an experience into that giving as well. So you're feeling seen. Meanwhile, you're also experiencing like this positive experience. Then that becomes even more embedded into that person and their feeling, and likely, is able to share that with other people. So it just becomes more contagious in that way, and this positive movement. It's really cool.
I think that what you just said around experience to me is like the most essential insight, because the things that make us healthy are experiences, and the things that make us unhealthy are moments of consumption, right? And most technology treats us like consumers, not creators. And that's why we feel sick after we've been doom scrolling for an hour and a half or stuck in our email. I mean, it was not designed to be like an interactive experience that honored you in that moment, right? It's extractive. And that's just the truth. And what's funny to me is, and I think part of why, I'm always going to gravitate towards the people who have the spatial experience or the movement experience, is like that's the part that's sane to me in terms of design. But what's interesting about those communities too is the minute that you've had design in your life, you understand the most valuable thing you've done in a week might be a single idea you had on a 15-minute walk, not everything else you typed. I mean, because you know what it's like to have a generative moment of like, oh yes, I just put these 17 things together and now I have the answer. What's fascinating to me, and this is like a side topic, but I really have been thinking about it a lot lately, is we're also very adjacent to major technology companies. And so we were seeing AI stuff come in early by the teams who were building it. And every single first story I heard from a builder of it was about how they had their first sense of a moment of creativity by engaging with it. It just wrote a song for my daughter's wedding. I, could paint a picture for the first time. And they were not that they're, incredible thinkers and creative in their own way, but they'd never had that feeling of like generative creativity, and they were in love with it. And they thought that this was a perfect tool because of it.
There's also good in this, like, Izzy is in Seattle right now. You're in Los Angeles. I'm in Ventura. We're able to have like, this conversation, which is great. It would be very difficult or challenging for us to be connected in this way, to be able to share, what we're talking about today, if it wasn't for this technology, So I think there's good and bad within the technology, and it's kind of understanding, what is too much, and also being mindful of when there might need to be an intervention.
But also, we're using it in this moment to augment something that humans have always done together, which is to have a dialogue, which is actually super profound, right? And I agree. And I mean, every time I get snide, I'm also like, I'm a female founder running a company with the best talent on the planet because I'm the only person who would hire the moms, and I don't care if they're talking to me from the Whole Foods aisle. And the only reason we can do it is because we've got every collaborative app known to man and a cell phone. Otherwise, we wouldn't exist, right? So I am grateful for all of those sides of it, but I do think that the degree to which it hasn't honored embodied intelligence in humans is problematic.
What's your take on like virtual reality then?
I mean, I started making in virtual reality, oh my goodness, over 15 years ago. And at the time that we started doing it, what I was in love with was vocal UX UI, full bodied, UX UI, walk into a room and go like this and something changes. We as a team saw enormous promise in it. And we as a team have now completely stepped away and put it down.
I love that everything about the way you talk about breakthrough and what you're building is very tied to your values, right? I mean, I think that's so clear in what you're doing, and finding the ways that technology does work for, breakthrough and for what you're looking for, and the ways it doesn't. I think there's a lot of clarity there. Um, Curious if we think about, the reality of organizations today trying to build spaces for employees. How can they design spaces that adapt dynamically to the needs of the employee? Or, what roles can technology play in activating or transforming a space in a way that's, healthy, or that you see as productive for all of us?
I mean, I think there's so many trends around this that are really beautiful. There's an acknowledgement from a built environment that, the workday is going to be better if I give you a nook that feels like a library, a big, wide open space. I mean, all these things that basically spaces designed for styles of work at different points during the day. And spaces that are adaptable. So I think that those things, like we're already seeing those trends, and those are super, super meaningful. I think it's an interesting moment because there's such a draw to get people back to the office, and there's still plenty of kicking and screaming. And so then there is pressure on organizations to be thinking about, well, what do you find when you get there, right? And why did we ask you to gather? And that's as much about experience design as is space design, is about calendar design. Bring people together. Don't tell them to come together and then to sit in adjacent conference rooms on a call where 3 people on it are in the same building and the 4th person is in India. I mean, it's like just silly the way that it's getting handled. So I just think there needs to be more thoughtfulness and more intentionality about it from an experience design way. But I also think that you have the technological potential to give people spaces they can tune themselves, with things like sound, with things like light, and I find it really interesting that people tend to know what they need, even like in an open office plan, to make a space feel like theirs. Like there's all a lot of thoughts about it. I mean, how does this relate to what you guys are thinking about as the biggest problems or opportunity spaces you're seeing from your side?
Yeah, I mean, I think, there's the side of things where, unactivated space is obviously not great for a company, and a company that helps our customers understand how their space is being used. That's an area where I think there's some interesting stories, right? How do you activate spaces that aren't currently, does it have to be about work all the time? Are those spaces the right, design or size or fit for the types of activities that need to happen, whether that's for taking breaks or for, doing your computer work or for meetings? I think there's just a lot here. But also there's, we work with our customers a lot on experience. And, when does a space break, for example, from a have what I need when I need it is a big topic. And, maybe there's a bigger picture here of how the space is breaking from, personal level versus just I can't find the conference room at 10 a.m. on Tuesday when I need it, right? So I think there's just tons of overlap with what the experience of an employee is like in a space, and then how that space supports it. I don't know, Brad, if you'd have a different thread you'd go down there.
It's always interesting. There's different leaders will have this perspective of like everyone needs to come back to the office to collaborate. If we're coming back to the office, we need to be meeting with people. That's the purpose of the office. There's a huge gap here, because what if the people are working at home and have like an insane, family where they're condensed into like a one small apartment, and then they have a crazy commute into the office, and like, there's rain and all this chaos, and then they get into the office. The last thing they want to do is go and engage with a bunch of people. And so they're actually looking for refuge. They're looking for a place that's calm and predictable where they can actually be productive. And so I think understanding these nuances of the human experience is very vital, and that the office can serve a lot of different purposes. And this again came up in another conversation recently of what are our expectations around the office? What is its purpose, and how can it fulfill those different human needs that we have depending on where we're coming from?
I love what you're saying. And I think there's a collective shared knowledge about how we work best, and it's not the same for all of us, right? Like I also have a bunch of colleagues who have in partner orgs that we work with who, like, for example, might be managing pretty significant ADHD, being back in very large, noisy, complex spaces after having had the experience of being able to go heads down and work productively at home is like really almost traumatic for them, right? Because now they know how they work best and they can't replicate it unless they can walk to the refuge you were just describing. And I think, why we used to go cram at a library in college. I mean, you do it because you need to work hard, but you need other bodies around you working hard at the same time to keep you focused. I can only think really clearly on a walk or in a loud cafe. Well, why? Because I went to college in New York. I mean, duh, that's how I learned how to work in those places. And so many of those things, again, they're about experience. They're not, were you lucky enough to get the gorgeous stairway in the center of your office? So I feel like there's a lot of opportunity for every kind of organization to invest in this kind of design and thinking and have it have an impact. I mean, interestingly, it might used to have been like, is work, am I getting this on Friday? Is there what are the amenities, blah, blah, blah. Now what we hear way more is people are mad at each other when they're back at the office. Well, why? Well, because there's CNN, the TV in the cafeteria, and because I have to arm wrestle people to get the next conference room. And because it really is the opposite of what we might have been wishing for in bringing people back. I don't know. It's a fascinating time. But you always hope that those kinds of moments are times where people will be like, okay, maybe, we believe in agile software development. Why don't we have a moment of agile collective thoughtfulness about how can we make work better for all of us? Because so many things are changing.
Yeah, it makes so much sense. I think, listening to sort of talk about that experience that can feel, almost like the Hunger Games, right? Like, I need that room. That person's always taking that room. Like, there's never enough peanut M&Ms, like whatever it might be. Like, we find a thing when we're having a bad experience. We found a thing, right? To channel and project our energy into. But I think on the one thing I would add is on the other side of things, the teams that, we work with all the time, the workplace strategists and the workplace technology teams and the designers and the portfolio, transaction teams, they really are trying. They're genuinely trying so hard to get this right. And, if for some reason it's just so hard. I think we're just in this, and this is just a personal perspective that I've been thinking about. I think we're in this transitional phase of the tools themselves, and whether that's furniture, whether that's, the way technology is delivered to us, whether that's the room experience technology, right? It's evolving, but we're not there yet. And meanwhile, these teams have to keep going every day. They have to build the conference room, and they have to choose the conference room technology, and they have to put it in front of their employees and allow a space for them to walk into. I think it's just a really challenging time for our teams, and yet they have really, really good intent. So anyways, that's just something I
No, I
observe.
completely agree. When they're lucky, when they're in an organization where they have the power they need, they're being allowed to experiment, right?
Mhm.
And not just experiment with the room, experiment with the people with the room. But I think the kind of stuff that what you were just referring to, if all they can do is pick what looks like the best technology / design / furniture today, but no one is giving them a team to play with or a week to try it or whatever, I mean, why would we get better results? And yet I agree with you, the amount of passion, but also part of that passion is being driven by the fact that for a lot of those people who are so thoughtful and smart, it's also a time where ops is like, we're right sizing, what's right size, blah, blah, blah. So there's pressure too, right? Of a different sort. I'm going to say something really unpopular, but I mean, another thing that's really interesting.
We're here for the hot takes.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. It's in that situation that you were just describing, in theory, the HR team is the team that's supposed to be thinking about the ops side of the people, yet really who you need experimenting with you is not the HR team. You need the managers experimenting with you. You need a team. And this is also about how do you launch a new idea inside an organization. You can get it into the organization, but it's going to sit there with no one touching it if someone doesn't get up and try it first and show their
Right. Yeah. Brad and I were just on a call last week with someone who was looking at the different ways of setting up piloting in their own organization, whether they should create those environments in a workspace for a team to use or to have it in an experience piloting space where others could come and use it. Right. And so there's obviously pros and cons to both. And reasons one might be able to do one versus the other. For example, this was a large organization that I guess, they have the space and the funding to create an actual center to do this stuff. But, Yeah, it's a tough thing because you either get employees, managers, whoever it might be coming in and getting a day, getting an hour with the environment, right, or the experience, or you can get one team getting immersed fully, right, or a couple teams. So there's so many different ways to do it, but they come with their own challenges of not really knowing what it's like when you then implement that across the whole organization. Brad, I know you've worked with a lot of A/B testing with some of our customers. Do you have other thoughts on that?
I think what's coming to mind right now is, Melissa, you were talking about it starts with the managers, and so often like we're thinking like top down in how to deploy some of this change. But Izzy, I'm reflecting on a number of our conversations that we have with customers right now. For example, if somebody needs more desks, that's coming from a business unit, typically somebody on the floor. It's a small group that is feeling constrained in some way. And then the real estate team or whoever's responsible will go and assess, is this need real? And do we want to invest further into providing more desks? And that change is starting from that manager, that person that initiated that conversation. It's not coming from the top saying, oh, we need to give this team more desks. So I think that kind of shift is kind of an interesting way of like, how do we start to deploy some activation of some of these other types of ways of working, right? I don't know, it was just kind of like a light bulb moment of listening to you two talk. We hear all the time about demands coming from different business units. And I know I'm kind of going sideways from the AB conversation, but it was just something that I was excited to kind of talk to you two about.
Yeah, but I think that's such an interesting point because demand from the business unit, more desks, well, what does that really mean? Maybe it's an environment that's so loud that people want more space from each other. I mean, it may not mean more desks. And yet that's how that person is translating it because they're not a designer, they're not an architect, they're not an experienced designer. And they may just have workers tired of your stuff being in my space, right? But like, isn't it more interesting in that moment to go have the conversation and see if is there another solution?
Yeah, absolutely. And, that's one of the conversations that we get into so often because we are providing insights and data about, are these desks actually, full, or is this neighborhood actually full? Are your conference rooms even actually full? Or is it that, the three favorite ones are always full during Tuesday through
And then
Wednesday
why are they
afternoon,
the
right?
prettiest? They have the best view, they have the best light, they're the quietest, but like there's 1,000 other ways to address that aspect of them. But I mean, also people get into like emotional relationships with space, right? I mean, there's back to the college. There's papers I turned in late because the one chair I liked in the architecture library was not available. You know what? Sorry, gotta come back.
Those architects are specifically a finicky.
So I do fall into that category for sure. But for other people, it's other things. It's funny. One of the things that we noted in our data early during COVID is that people that were successfully transitioning to working from home the most effectively were people who worked to music, which is really interesting because they knew like, oh, I can make this feel energetic. Well, now I need to turn it down. It's like they were able to tune their own space based on what they needed. And a lot of us just, we have another way of addressing it. I feel like the average human, if given a toolkit of like, what do you need to make this space feel safe and focused so you can go head down, would, if you showed them some things, would be like, oh yeah, that would work for me. Right. And so I find it bizarre that we're not trying to take that same tactic when faced with the question of do we need more desks or do we need, one more office or fewer offices or why don't you want to be here on a Wednesday?
Yeah, I mean, that's the exact experiment of the work from home, right? I mean, that will work for me. It's actually what everyone that, was a desk worker at home during either current hybrid or during the pandemic, this is what works for me. It's not at all the same setup that my partner has downstairs for like it's what works for each of us. But it's fun to see those, see that desire path, right? See people picking their desire path on their workstations.
Can we unpack that emotional relationship to space a little more here? You were talking about a chair in school that you were just tell us about the courting of this chair. How did it come about? How did you find this chair? Did you sit in a bunch of chairs and then finally you're
Oh,
like,
yeah. I mean, first off, you have to find the place first. So this was in the architecture library at Columbia, and I only liked one floor of it. And I'm just persnickety. I mean, I grew up in a home with a urban designer, landscape architect. So I think I grew up with I literally mentally suffer with bad design. Like I cannot think clearly. I would say that that's probably true of most people, but they might not know it, right? Because they just haven't been blessed to have the alternate experience. So, but I think we also make emotional connections to space from what we've accomplished there in the past, right? I mean, my husband's a writer and he writes in Starbucks, go figure. There's many reasons for that. I could list them all, but his Starbucks just got shut down. And I swear it was more intense to watch than grieving a relative. And because literally he's written 2 books at that table.
Wow.
Right. And so I think people who, especially people who have to work creatively and independently, I mean, think about how many artist studios you've seen where literally their brain is spread out over the walls, right? They're using their space to think. That's the photograph of the place that I saw. This is the letter from my wife, right? Like, and if it were not up there, they couldn't do their work. All humans are that way. We think with each other, we think with our spaces, and we think with our bodies. And so the more we can do that, and it's interesting though, that like this thing that you were just talking about, people don't unpack their emotional relationships to their workplace, what space feels like theirs, et cetera. But I guarantee you everyone's got a mental map of it. I only feel good if I can have this corner, Does that
Yeah,
make
you're also like making me think about, we have a number of customers that are transitioning, from like a traditional office where they earned the right to have like a window view, like a window private office. And they've been there for 10, 20, 30 years. Their entire education background like led to them being in this position now.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden we're like, no, dog, like you're going to share that space. Like it's now part of the collective community. And like that has to be, I hadn't thought about this.
Oh,
but
good grief. That's
majority-
enormous. It's enormous. And I mean, think of all the TV shows where we make that, the movies where we make that the narrative. How do you show power? Oh, look at the guy's view. I mean, and there are people who literally will say, like, I worked up my way up the hierarchy to get off the shared floor. So ironic. Like, we could have just let you stay home and work in your living room. I mean, yeah. Also, my mom is still working at 88 and out of school, and a school that wouldn't exist if she hadn't done so much amazing stuff there. And she's not full-time anymore, thank goodness. But the moment that she had to give up the desk that was hers, like, really hurt, right? And yet, I mean, she's a rational person, and yet it hurt because it was her spot in the ecosystem. So, but wouldn't it be better if like there was this young man, an architect at an event about future of work that I ran a workshop in, and we were all talking about what does it take to make a space feel like yours? He's like, well, what I need to be able to think is this little thing, and he pulled it out of his pocket. Okay, I'm weird. I have a shell that we 3D printed in metal, whatever. But he had a little bus that he carried around with him. And like whatever it was, like he just needed that there. And then it felt like his space. And so I think part of it too is that we've got to give people other options. How do you paint this as your space? Oh, I only like the light to be yellow. I need to hear it sounds, and it's yours, tune it.
Yeah. We have a customer and they have unassigned seating, but they have these hosts on each floor, and next to the hosts, it's kind of like a reception area. They have like a stand of plants that you can adopt for the day. And so then you take the plant with you to whatever desk or whatever meeting you're going to. And so you're kind of the caretaker of that plant, but it also gives you this, sense of belonging, and it's yours, for the day, like the sense of ownership. It's a very interesting idea, and kind of riffing on that. What advice or like what kind of tips would you have for people activating spaces differently? Like do you have any other ideas around this?
I mean, I think that it's important to remember that multisensory is like in our favor, right? And that there's digital tools that we forget about. We can paint with sound, we can paint with light, we can paint with visuals, which is one of the things that Breakthru does. Those can temporarily transform a space in a way that's very provocative and very meaningful to people. And yet, I think it's easy for people who don't come from like a multimedia background to forget that those tools are at their disposal. But the other domain experts who we're not talking to, and it's funny because I'm talking with a few people now about bringing panels together with this as a domain expert. If you look at preschool teachers, like from Reggio Emilia, for example, where literally they're changing what the classroom looks like weekly to try to provoke different behavior and different thought patterns in the toddlers, like they'll be like, no big deal. All you got to do is like move this one Japanese screen to this area and give people 3 different fiddle tools that they didn't have before, and they're going to be home free, right? So I think we forget about other stuff we can use, props, color, art, plants, and if you look back in time, I love looking at Japanese court life as a time where people were really able to bring in nature, bring in poetry, and bring in objects to help people have these small, like, breakthrough moments in their day, right? You're having a crappy day, I might hand you a tea or I hand you a poem, and the next thing you know, you're in a completely different headspace. But what else did they do? They gave each other art. It's kind of ugly, it's plastic, but it's a Japanese maple, right? And they bonsai, right? Here's the whole universe in a tree, tiny, can come to your desk with you. I just feel like humans have known how to do a lot of this stuff for a while, but we just kept it out of office spaces.
Yeah, I think I like even the story of the bus, right? Like if we just embraced that our coworker might have a bus on the conference room table, like it's like bring it on.
Not teddy bear, honestly. Don't bring their dog. I didn't just say that. That's also unpopular. I think it's hard to have pets before.
Love a pet in the room, but it can be tricky. Um, well, Melissa, this was such a fun conversation.
Oh, I had such a good time. Yeah, very fun to hang out today. What would be more fun would be to collaborate on some things. So
Yeah,
That's
let's do
in
it.
our future. Let's do it.
yeah, I really would.
And so, Melissa, for listeners who want to learn more about Breakthru and your work, where should they go?
They should go to Breakthru, which is BREAKTHRU .me. Breakthru.me.
Breakthru.me.
Yeah.
Awesome. Melissa, thanks for sharing how storytelling, design, and technology can come together to create healthier, more human workplaces.
Yeah, and for everyone listening, maybe the takeaway is this. Don't just optimize for efficiency. Think about how your workplace can actively support your well-being.
If you like this episode, share it with someone on your team who's curious about the future workplace experience.
We'll be back soon with more conversations like this. Until then, keep learning, keep adapting, and keep working forward.
Amazing. So happy to be with you both. Thank you for having me. Take care.
Thank you.